Chapter 2. "Hey, boy, you fell asleep." With a jolt, Vince bolted upright at hearing his father. "Good dream?" his father asked. "It was strange," Vince replied with a dry, raspy voice. His throat was parched, and a thin bead of sweat wet his brow. Marcus eyed him curiously. "Strange dream for a strange night. I look forward to a pint of Medgar's finest ale. You look as though you could use—" The air suddenly felt disturbed. An unnatural cold breeze froze both men in mid-conversation. Even the horse seemed to slow and sidestep expectantly. "Pa?" Vince started, realizing his voice was cracking and barely a whisper. "Cowardly, mud-brained farmer," he thought. He cleared his throat and mustered his strength, and uttered forth what could only be described as somewhere between a scared child and a squirrel that's been treed. "Pa!" he drowned out as he heard the fear in his own voice. "It's the wind. Come across the crest, boy. Gets cold up there," Marcus said, his voice rock solid, but his face looked determined. Not afraid, not angry, not really. But he had that look like he had when he had to confront a rabid wolf. A look at being familiar with the danger, but determined to overcome it. "Okay, Pa," Vince said, glad that his voice sounded almost normal. The cold didn't seem to be going anywhere. Vince never felt the weather change temperature this quickly before. They spent the rest of the trip in silence, both glancing around, but trying to hide it from the other. Vince had this overwhelming feeling that they were needed to get to town, to the safety of others. After what seemed like the longest trip he ever took, the dried and dying forest gave way to fences, with a few pigs and a myriad of thatched roofs and pitched wood roofs. The smell of cooking wafted through the air, delighting the senses. Vince noticed his father inhaling deeply, a slight smile touching the corner of his lips. Town seemed strangely quiet, though. Where is everyone? Faintly in the distance he could hear a slight high pitch, quickly lowering in tone. Music! A bard! It must be! No one in town can make melodies like that! The closer to town center they came, the sound grew in intensity. A voice could be heard, raising and lowering in time with the music. A lute, and some kind of clinking sound, like when old man Frater plays spoons. Whatever the instrument, Vince didn't care. Maybe he will play Jaili the True and fight against Krogs, he thought. He heard that tale so many times he could probably recite it himself, and he still loves hearing it. His father's mood was visibly better as well, his eyes wider with just a tinge of excitement. As they approached the tavern, they could see it was bustling. The tavern was the center of town, both physically and in daily life. It had a large enough tavern that meetings could be held, and with 5 rooms on the second floor, it was larger and more robust than most buildings, and it had a decent kitchen. It was the only place in town travelers would go, making it the hub for information around the whole of Two Forks. The Queen's Arm, emblazoned on a wooden sign, hung outside the front door, with a sword painted on it, the hilt wrapped in blue ribbon. 2 unfamiliar horses were tied up outside. One was an older horse with side bags, brown and plain. Vince hopped off the cart and tied their horse to the railing. As he looked down at the brown horse, it seemed so plain he almost had to force his eyes to look at it. They wanted to just glance right past it, but he forced himself to look. Just peeking outside of a side bag was the tip of a flute. The bard's horse, then, he thought, glad he could take his eyes off this plain animal. He then concentrated his attention to the other horse, larger than most, and a color of black that looked like it glowed. What a strange black, Vince marveled. It was as muscular as the plow horses in town. It gave off a feeling of almost arrogance. The saddle was a very fine saddle, The kind traders sometimes bring to sell, but leave with it anyway because no one has the gold to buy it. A large saddle with sturdy, thick straps. "A wonderful horse," he said aloud. "Yes, it is," Marcus replied, putting his hand in Vin's shoulder. "A soldier's horse," he said with a suspicious look in his eye. "Come, let's go in and have that pint," he said as he gently guided Vin's towards the tavern door. What? How would my father know what a soldier's horse would look like? Vince thought. He's never left Two Forks. At least, not that I know. End of chapter 2. I'm experimenting with length of time and time for other things in life, so I appreciate the fact that you are listening to the shorter version. I will come up with a more steady rate once I figure out the best way to do this, and I appreciate your patience. Chapter 3 will be coming up perhaps tomorrow.